And today we are here to talk about the importance of communicating science. So I'll first share the slides. Yeah, is everything visible to you now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we are today. I'll talk to you about the importance of communicating science. And already he has mentioned my bio, so I'm not going into it. So this is going to be the outline of my presentation today, with a brief introduction about scientific temper and how world's governments and specifically our country have highlighted the importance of science in our daily lives. We'll move on to understand what science communication is all about. Then we'll see why we need to communicate science with a flair of history. I'll give you two examples of history to highlight it. And we'll move ahead and see who need to communicate science and understand the difference between scientific communication, scientific writing, science writing, as well as science journalism. Having got a feel of all the above, we'll be in a position to understand how we can communicate science in a better way. Finally, with a few science communication resources, we'll conclude the talk. So I've put this particular declaration on science and the use of scientific knowledge adopted in the World Conference on Science in 1999 because it was the first ever time the world's governments and the international scientific community gathered under one roof to prepare a social contract for science in the 21st century. Okay, this particular conference happened in Hungary, in Budapest, in June 1999. It was organized by UNESCO and International Council of Scientific Education. Among the various other points that was established, these three are really important in the context of science communication because it was established that scientific knowledge should be shared. And there is a real need for cooperation between different governments, civil society, the business sector, and the scientists. Also, it was established that it was the vital responsibility of the professionals to communicate science. Now, if we look into the constitution of our country, the constitution of India, in the article 51AH of the Indian constitution, it says that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to develop scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Well, this term scientific temper is uniquely Indian, and it was formulated by Jawaharlal Nehru. In his book, A Discovery of India, he says that scientific temper is about the search for truth and new knowledge and the refusal to accept anything without testing and trial, the capacity to change previous conclusions in the face of new evidence, the reliance on observed fact and not on preconceived theory, the hard discipline of mind. Well, this is pretty much everything that we do in science and research, right? Nehru says that it's something that all of us need to possess, and it is as much a social and political tool as it is a scientific one. Okay, so having said that, now let's understand what science communication is. In pretty simple words, we may say that it is the successful dissemination of scientific knowledge to a wide range of audiences. This wide range of audiences include both the scientific community as well as the general public. Even the scientific community in itself is a broad spectrum. Okay, for example, consider a neurobiologist trying to understand quantum computing, or a nanoscientist learning mechanobiology. Everywhere good science communication is essential. In other words, we can also define science communication as a practice of putting out scientific information for the purpose of creating a shared understanding. You should understand that shared knowledge is something that generates new research questions, which can start a cycle anew. And the one and the most important reason is you're not doing anything if nobody knows about it. And that is what science communication is all about. Now I'll give you a flair of history through these two events where two amazing scientific breakthroughs has resulted to become amazing science communication failures. Most of you might be knowing about Gregor Mendel, who's now known as the father of genetics. But when he published his work on garden peas in 1960s, due to lack of science communication, no one actually noticed that he had unlocked the secret of genetic inheritance. It was only later in the 90s, long after his death, people rediscovered his work and understood its significance and crowned him the father of genetics. Similar is the case of Alexander Fleming and penicillin. The first ever antibiotics, penicillin, was actually discovered in the 1920s. But after publishing his discovery, Fleming did not understand the need to popularizing it or collaborating his work. And because of that, it was only a decade later in the 1940s, biologists Florey and Chain stumbled upon his research and understood its significance and went on to try it on people. So if you think we'll understand that the cost of Mendel not communicating his discovery is that evolutionary biology is 40 years behind. And the cost of Fleming not communicating his work is that millions of people who died, who could have been saved due to with the help of this antibiotic. So maybe it may not be wrong to say that the fate of humanity, more or less, could rest on scientists successfully communicating and collaborating to help solve the problems that the world is facing today. Now that we got an idea about the importance of communicating science, let us see in greater detail about it. Through science communication, what we do is we actually bridge the gap between science and society. And this is a mutually beneficial process. Both the scientific community as well as a general public, both are more or less equally benefited in this process. Through science communication, scientists get a chance to play an important role in the government decisions related to science policy, science funding, and this obviously have a great impact on the scientific progress. Because if there's no funding, there's no proper funding into the required areas of science, no development or no particular research can go on and happen. On the other hand, society benefits from the knowledge shared and gained. Because if people have this knowledge, it actually contributes to the well-being of the people and the economic development. We can explain this with the help of a very simple example. For example, let's say vaccines. Okay, if people are aware of the importance of vaccination, getting vaccinated, the more is the chance that they'll vaccinate themselves and their family. So lesser is the chance that they fall ill, which means that there is more chance they stay healthy, and if the people are healthy, they can contribute more to the economic development. Another important advantage of communicating science is that it helps to enhance the visibility of scientific community. This is a really important thing to consider, because only if the scientific community has visibility, it will help to build networks and collaborations, and it also helps to increase the reach of science. Let's say like a group of scientists come up with an amazing discovery that can potentially help the mankind. Only if they communicate this work, some industries, organizations, or some government bodies will come to know about it and think, cool, this is a nice thing, let's market it, it's going to be profitable. Same is the case with collaborations too. Now, thinking from the side of the society, it is the taxpayers' money that is being utilized to fund research. So they have every right to know how this money is spent. Okay. Hence, through the science communication, this awareness is created in the general public. And quite interestingly, creating this awareness in the public in turn benefits the scientific community. Okay, because when scientific community has a trust, okay, they believe that okay, their money is properly utilized. They have the scientific community gets a public trust in their work. In a democratic setup, only if people are happy that their money is properly utilized, the system can work in a smooth manner. Yet another important way society benefits from good science communication is by being able to counter scientific misinformation and misconceptions. This is particularly important in the present scenario, where along with the pandemic, infodemic has become a serious issue. We may actually say that proper science communication can bear the cost of a life in today's world. Well, these are just a few significant reasons to communicate science. There are a lot more if you think about. Finally, what is the conclusion is that science communication is better for the scientific community, and it is better for the general public too. This is an interesting article that came in Hindu on October 10, 2017. Aspiring scientists may first need to tell a story. Okay, and this is the first portion of this article. And it says that DST is working on a scheme where the PhD students in science streams will have to write a popular science article about their research compulsorily before they complete their PhD degree. And this was not said by any random person. This was actually said by Professor Ashutosh Sharma, the DST secretary himself. And the reason cited was that this will help the science students take science communication more seriously and also help them to engage in a better way with the general public. This has not been implemented yet, but we're not sure, what may happen in the future. Well, this is something that I think all of us should always keep in our mind, because it's something that all of us should always keep in our minds. Okay. Yeah, because I'm telling this because there's a general assumption that the general public is not good enough to understand science. This thought is not only wrong, but also very much problematic. Because when science is gate kept, it kind of erodes people's belief in science, and this disbelief has a tendency to spread fast. So what we need is concision. That is the ability to convey complex information using fewer simplest words and not dumping down, which is the assumption that the general public can't understand. This is a beautiful cartoon that explains this concept in a beautiful way. Science is like a treasure of knowledge, and if some animal sits on top of it saying this isn't for you, gatekeeping it, then the other people, the general audience, when they come to see this, they try to acquire information about this. They're not allowed to do it, and they have the tendency to believe that is this actually a clear treasure, and this thought has a tendency to spread fast, which is why better science communication is really important. Having said that, now the question is, who should communicate science? I'll say pretty much everyone who knows science and loves science. But broadly speaking, we can categorize it into two major communicator types, which is the science communicator and the scientist communicator. The science communicator are basically media persons who are typically concerned with what you call the craft of writing or the art of writing, art of storytelling. And they have good command of their language, and they can weave beautiful stories, and they have access to large media outlets, and they can possibly reach a large audience. And the scientist communicator, they are basically scientists who wish to communicate their research to the research findings to the public. Actually, the scientist communicators are more or less equally important as a science communicator, because only the scientists themselves can then present a unique point of view which a science communicator may not be able to, because the scientists have first-hand experience working in their labs, and they just have a personal history that they can share with the public or the other even within the science community itself. They also have in-depth knowledge about the field. So but this in-depth knowledge at the same time is a very good thing. At the same time, it can also be a little bit a pitfall, like, because once if you know something in greater detail, it might be difficult for you to condense information into simple terms. So to summarize, we can call the science communicator as a translator. Basically, what they do is they talk with the scientists, they interview them, ask intelligent questions, and get, they get information about the scientific field, the research, everything, and they then kind of translate the science into a much simpler version, and they present it to the audience. The scientist communicator is much like the first-hand originator of scientific information. And as I told earlier, they're also equally important, because the scientific community as well as the general audience really wish to hear from the scientists themselves too. Having said that, now I think we need to know the difference between what scientific writing, science writing, and science journalism is. Scientific writing is what scientists write for other scientists. Okay, if you are a scientist, you do your research, you write an article, you publish it, and if you want to write a review article in a field, you write it. And all this are published in academic journals. It's full of jargon. It serves its purpose well, but it's not something that the general public can read and understand. And that's not to say that scientists don't write for a general public. They do. In fact, that's what we have just discussed as the scientist communicator type. We have very famous books written by scientists for the general public, popular science books like A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, The Selfish Gene, and many other books by Richard Dawkins, and the books of Stephen Jay Gould, books of Jared Diamond, and the list is endless. Okay, they all take a subject that they know very well and write about it for the general audience. We can call this in some sense as science writing. The boundary between what science writing and science journalism is can be a little bit blurred, but still we can say that there is a distinction. Okay, what Hawkins or Diamond did is not science journalism. They are writing from a position of authority. Like they are the experts in their field. They have in-depth knowledge in their field. Now, what if a media person, okay, who's not a scientist, but a person who is passionate about science and who understands science, wish to write about it? And that's where science journalism comes in. Just like the science communicator type we have just discussed. The kind of articles that cover the latest updates in science, which appear in science news portals and science magazines, all that is what comes under science journalism. Yeah. So now that we've got an idea about what is science communication, why we need to communicate science, and who need to communicate science, now we are in position to see how we as scientist communicators or science communicators can communicate our science in a better way. In various websites and books, if you look, there'll be a lot of tips on this regard. Okay, but among them, I feel that these four are the most important ones to consider while communicating science. Okay, number one, understand your target audience, because we need to explain in different ways according to what our audience really want from us. Number two, avoid jargon and get straight to the point. I mean, of course, this is the by large the motive of communicating science itself. If it's going to be full of jargon, then what is the purpose of communicating science? Then number three, apply 6-year-old child proof. This means that you need to be able to communicate the science you're doing even to a school child. And number four, use of visual media while communicating science. We'll see in detail about these 4 points in the coming slides. Yeah, so the first point is knowing the audience you're supposed to communicate, which is really important. And this is an interesting video where this is a video by Wired. Wired has, I think, 6 or 7 videos in this regard, where it is like a challenge. They challenge an expert in the field to explain a particular area that the area which they are expert in, to at 5 different levels of difficulty. Here, it's a neurobiologist is given the challenge to explain it at a Connectome to 5 different difficulty levels. Can you hear this video?
I'm assistant.
I hope you're able to hear this video.
Yes, we can hear.
Argonne National Labs. What the connectome is it's a kind of a newly made up term for describing a kind of neuroscience research where we try to map the brain at a scale that's never been mapped before. Every person here can leave with understanding it at some level. Do you know why we're here today?
Because we're talking about science.
Yes, we're going to talk about science, and we're going to talk about a very specific kind of science about people who study brains. Do you know what a brain is? What is it?
And something that helps you remember things.
Definitely. So what we're going to talk about, this is something that people study in the brain called the connectome. Do you know that your body is made up of really tiny things called cells?
Yes, I do that.
Okay, well, there's more cells in your brain, like way more cells than all the stars we can see. And so what the connectome is we'd like to know where every cell in your brain is and how it talks to every other cell in your brain. That was awesome, Daniel. Thank you.
Connectome?
Connectome.
To be honest, I have no idea.
That's good. That's a great place to start. There are cells in your brain. Those brain cells are connected by wires to each other. Electricity travels down those wires and communicates from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain. And each of those brain cells makes 1,000 connections, something like 100 trillion connections in one brain, in your brain. Could I take all of that information and put it inside a computer? Would that computer then be you?
Computers, they don't have feelings. They won't have feelings. And I think that's one thing that makes the human race strong.
I would say that map also has your feelings in it. Because here's why. Your feelings, most neuroscientists think, come from your brain anyway. And amazingly, whether when you feel happy or sad or angry or scared, that's just brain cells communicating with each other. So I think today we're going to talk about a connectome. Have you ever heard of that?
A connectome?
Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
I don't
Good.
think so.
It's a map of all the connections between every neuron in your brain. Literally, in a human brain, something like the map of the 1 quadrillion connections that 100 billion neurons make with each other.
Is this like a map where that's like an actual visual representation, like using microscopy, or
Yes.
just data? Wow, wow.
Yeah.
I'm understanding more so that it's a mapping of the circuitry, the pathways between neurons that can lead to evidence of patterns in your brain that are common between different people.
We have to use electron microscopes. And then what we have been developing are ways to slice the brain into really thin slices, use an electron microscope to take a picture of each slice, and then use computers to put it all back. Imagine that we could get the map of every connection, right? And we knew how neurons fire. Do you think we could put that in a computer, that map, and then therefore that computer should be able to think just like the brain that we extracted it from?
Well, the computer only communicates with itself in binary, so it only has two options. It can only ask itself yes or no questions, but a human brain has an infinity of directions that it can go.
Neurons are also digital, meaning a neuron either fires or it doesn't fire. So that's either 1 or 0. And it's the combination of those ones or zeros that actually produce the 10,000 different answers that you say.
Okay, so I'm not showing you the full video because now I think you got a basic understanding. Yeah, the three levels you've seen. The other is graduate level and the expert level. So if you're interested, you can see this video. It's available on YouTube, and also many similar things. Okay, not just the connector, many other things, as I told earlier, are also explained. So let's move ahead. Yeah. So next is the second point about communicating science in a better way is the 6-year-old child proof. And it actually comes from the famous saying of Albert Einstein that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old child, then probably you don't understand it yourself. Our ability to explain a concept to a child is indeed an indicator of our understanding about the topic. I tell you, you should actually try this out. You should try to explain what you're doing, your research to a high school kid, and this is going to be interesting. See, with this communication with the child, the child.
Yes.
Am I audible? What happened?
Yeah, audible.
Okay. So, as I was telling, with this communication, the child should be able to take home something. Okay, if not everything, just like what we saw in the previous video. If not the whole concept, the child is getting an idea about what is being conveyed. Now, moving on to the third point. Yeah, no jargon, no jargon, no jargon. Focus and get to the point straight. Okay, that too in the simplest way possible. So, as I told earlier, if your writing or presentation is full of sophisticated scientific stuffs, then the whole purpose of science communication is totally failed there. But I should tell you this job of simplifying is not at all simple, because we have to strike a balance between accuracy and simplicity. The information needs to be in a condensed form. At the same time, the essence of the topic, okay, what is being conveyed, the essence of the topic should not be lost. Yeah, and the fourth point is about the role of visual media. And this art is a beautiful tool which you can play with to communicate science in a better way. This is a beautiful set of illustrations by Lipsa. She's a science illustrator. Here, she's explaining the different types of mutations that happen in our DNA through these beautiful pictures. Just by looking at these pictures, we can get an idea, a deletion, that a particular portion of this deleted point mutation. At one particular point, this mutation is happening. The insertion, what is happening in missense mutation, everything. Just by having this visual representation, we are able to get the whole concept, and that is the beauty of using art while communicating science. Yes, this is a collection of hand-drawn infographics which explain the process of academic publications. This question that what do you do in research? What is this academic publication is all about? This might be a common question that most of you might have heard in your at some point in your career. Here is how we can explain that to the general audience. Here we have a set of infographics which I've made into a video. I think you'll be able to see it. So that was a beautiful set of illustrations, and the courtesy goes to Katie Everson. Yeah, I think with that we almost reached the end of this presentation, and now I'll give you a few science communication resources which might be useful to you. Like if you're genuinely interested in science journalism kind of stuffs, I think workshops or short-term courses are a good point to start with. And CBS Bangalore and ISA Pune usually host yearly workshops which are worth attending. They have very good panelists whom you can actually personally talk with and interact. And also training course in science journalism by Indian Science Communication Society. It's a 1 year short-term course. If you're interested, you may attend it. Also fellowships and some competitions, something like that is something good you can add to your CV if you're going to a career in science journalism kind of things. So you can try some out. This is just an incomplete list, so I should tell you that there are a lot of other things you can add to it. Yeah, next is the Open Notebook. Okay, this Open Notebook is a wonderful website. Okay, I'll recommend it to not just the people who are genuinely interested in science journalism kind of stuff. Even as scientists, you need to have some science communication skills, and this website will be useful to you in every sense. They have beautiful articles written by experts in the field about how we can improve our skills, like how what you should do and things like that. It's very interesting. Just if you it'll be good if you can go through it. And as science communicators, I mean as scientist communicators too, we all always have the a plethora of opportunities. Okay, freelancing is a nice way. You can write your own blogs, and you can be a guest writer. You can write guest stories, pitch and write stories in different portals as guest writers. And also it's always important that you should make science outreach activities an important part of your research life. Through it, as scientists or as science researchers, we should always try to improve our science communication skills. Yeah, so here it is. I think I hope I was able to communicate to you at least something about the significance of communicating science. Yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, and if I know, I'll be happy to answer.
Uh, Thank you, Nandita, for a nice talk. Now, QA session is open now, so it's a request to the audience. Please put a question in QA chat box. I think we have received a couple of questions. So, first question is on writing for a wide audience. There could be a difference in the level of their science understanding. So, how do you strike a balance on the level at which one should communicate? Please address this question.
Yeah, that's what I was telling. We should actually need to strike a balance between accuracy as well as simplicity.